The colony night was silent, except for the low hum of the power cores that kept the settlement alive. Daniel stood in the small metal shelter he called home, his hands shaking as he tried to rock the newborn child in his arms. The baby's cries were sharp and endless, echoing off the cold walls, filling the room with a sound that pierced his chest. He had no idea how to soothe her, no idea how to quiet the storm in her tiny lungs. He was exhausted, hungry, and trembling, and yet none of that compared to the ache in his heart as he looked at the empty doorway. Only hours before, Emma had stood there with her eyes full of shadows, clutching the pack she had prepared in secret. She had said nothing for a long time, her lips pressed together as though she was fighting herself. Daniel had pleaded with her not to go, telling her they had to stay together, that their daughter needed them both. But she had only shaken her head, her face streaked with tears, and whispered words that would haunt him forever. "You will survive, Daniel. You always survive. I can't stay here. I can't raise a child on this world. I'm sorry." Then, she had turned and walked out, leaving him alone with a baby still too small to even hold up her head. Daniel had run after her at first, but the colony guards had stopped him at the perimeter. She had chosen to leave, boarding a trader's shuttle, heading into the dark between worlds, and there was nothing he could do to bring her back. The baby had cried in his arms, unaware that her mother was gone, unaware that her father's heart had been split in two. Now, 3 days later, Daniel sat by the dim light of the shelter, watching his daughter sleep in a bundle of worn fabric he had stitched together. Her name was Lily, a name Emma had chosen before the birth, though Daniel spoke it now with bitterness and love tangled together. He whispered to her, not knowing if she could even hear, "She left us, Lily, but I will never leave you, I swear it." Life in the colony was not kind to humans. The settlement was ruled by taller, stronger beings whose bodies could endure the radiation storms, the thin air, and the poisonous dust of this world. To them, humans were fragile, too soft to last more than a few years. Many had come from Earth, seeking work, but most ended up broken by the mines, discarded when they could no longer labor. Daniel had known the risk, but he had never expected to raise a child here alone. The other workers mocked him when he appeared with the baby tied to his chest in a sling, her small head peeking out from the cloth. They sneered at the sight, their heavy voices rumbling in languages thick with contempt. One of them, a scaled miner with sharp teeth, laughed and said loudly that the human would be dead before the child could even walk. Daniel ignored them, pressing his lips to his daughter's forehead and carrying her into the mine where he worked, because there was no one else to watch her. He tied her to a beam in a padded basket he had built, close enough that he could reach her if she cried. The aliens scoffed, but Daniel worked harder than any of them, sweat pouring down his back, hands bleeding as he carved through stone and metal. Each strike fueled by the thought that his daughter depended on him alone. At night, he stumbled home with her in his arms, feeding her with formula he could barely afford, whispering stories of Earth, of blue skies and green fields she had never seen. Sometimes when the loneliness crushed him, he told her about her mother, but his words turned bitter and sharp. He could not understand how Emma could have walked away, how she could have looked at this tiny life and chosen to abandon it. He swore again and again that he would never forgive her. The colony was harsh, and the aliens, who ruled it, believed only in strength and survival. Yet Daniel began to notice that Lily was not like other children. Even as a baby, she rarely fell ill, even though the thin air often made other human children sick. She laughed easily, her small voice echoing in the shelter, filling the darkness with a kind of light Daniel had never felt before. The aliens who passed by noticed it too, muttering to one another about how strange it was that the human child thrived here when so many others had not. Daniel held on to that with fierce pride, telling himself it was proof that humanity could endure. proof that he was not failing as a father. Still, every night when he lay down, exhaustion drowning him, he thought of Emma. He imagined her on some distant station, free of the dust and the hunger, and he felt a fire in his chest that burned hotter than the colony's suns. She had left him to carry this burden alone, and though part of him still ached with love, another part whispered that if she ever returned, he would never allow her near Lily again. The baby stirred in her sleep, a tiny hand curling around his finger, and Daniel felt his heart soften. He pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "You're all I need." Outside, the alien guards marched past, their heavy boots thudding against the metal ground, their eyes sliding over his shelter without care. To them he was nothing, just another human barely surviving. But Daniel knew different. He knew that raising Lily would prove them wrong, that every breath she took was defiance, that every day she survived was a victory not just for him, but for all of humanity. In that quiet moment, as the colony night stretched on and the stars above burned cold, Daniel made a silent vow. Whatever the universe demanded, however cruel the years became, he would protect Lily. He would raise her, and he would never allow the shadow of abandonment to touch her heart again. 3 years passed in the colony, years that felt like a lifetime. To Daniel, as he worked, bled, and sacrificed everything to keep his daughter alive, the days were long and heavy, filled with the dust of the mines and the choking air of the settlement, and the nights were colder than he ever imagined. Yet through every hardship, he carried Lily in his arms, her small laughter cutting through the darkness like sunlight. She had become the reason he woke each morning, and the reason he refused to collapse when his body begged him to stop. In the beginning, survival had seemed impossible. He had no help, no partner to share the sleepless nights, no one to carry the weight of the choices he made. Emma's absence was a wound that never healed, and though he tried to bury it under work, the betrayal lived inside him like a fire that refused to go out. Still, Lily grew strong. She learned to speak before most children her age, her words clumsy but full of warmth. She called him Papa, with a sweetness that melted the hardness around his heart. The aliens continued to mock him as he carried her through the settlement. They said humans were too weak to last in this place, that Daniel was foolish to cling to a child when others abandoned them at birth. Some of the miners jeered when they saw him with her tied to his chest, telling him she would die long before she could walk. But then Lily began to run, her small legs kicking up the red dust of the colony streets, her laughter echoing like music against the metal walls, and their words faltered. They could see that she was not frail, not like the other children who often fell sick. Her energy seemed endless, her eyes bright with curiosity and wonder. Daniel watched her climb over broken machines and explore corners of the colony, where even adults hesitated. She asked questions he struggled to answer, pointing at the stars, and asking why they shone so far away, asking why some creatures had wings while humans did not, asking why her mother was gone. At that last question, Daniel's chest tightened, and he could only tell her that sometimes people made choices they could not take back. He promised her, though, that she was not abandoned, that she was loved every day of her life. Money was always scarce. He took extra shifts in the mines, his hands cracked and blistered from the tools he wielded, his back aching from carrying loads meant for machines. Sometimes he traded favors with aliens, fixing their equipment with clever human hands, patching systems they thought useless, and in return gaining scraps of food or a little more oxygen for Lily. He had learned that aliens were strong, but they lacked the human talent for improvisation. Where they saw broken metal, Daniel saw possibility. He built a small water purifier from discarded parts, kept their shelter warmer by rigging an old generator, and made toys for Lily out of wires and gears. Other humans in the colony began to notice. Some looked at him with pity, others with quiet admiration, but no one dared speak against the alien rulers. They whispered, though, that Daniel's daughter was different, that she carried something inside her that gave hope where there had been none. For in her smile was a defiance that the colony had never known, the proof that humanity could survive even in a place designed to break them. Despite the years of hardship, Daniel never once considered leaving. Every time he thought of Emma, a mix of anger and sorrow rose in him. He remembered the night she walked away, the sound of her voice when she said she could not stay, and it burned him still. He told himself that if she ever returned, he would never forgive her, that she had lost the right to call herself a mother. Yet a small part of him, buried deep beneath the bitterness, wondered if she thought of Lily, if she ever lay awake at night wishing she had stayed. As Lily grew older, she began to help him in small ways. She carried water bottles to the shelter. She sorted tools, and sometimes she even sat quietly in the corner of the mines with other children, drawing pictures in the dust while their parents worked. The aliens frowned but said nothing, for they had begun to realize that Daniel could not be broken. His determination had become a quiet legend, a story whispered among the workers, a reminder that humans were not as fragile as others believed. One evening, as the colony skies burned with the colors of the setting sun, Daniel sat outside their shelter. Lily curled against his side. She had fallen asleep after a long day of play, her hair tangled, her face streaked with dust, and yet she looked peaceful. He stared at her and felt a strange mix of pride and fear. She was his greatest joy, but also his greatest vulnerability. If anything happened to her, he knew he would have nothing left. The aliens who passed by that night looked at the scene with something close to respect. They did not understand why humans clung to family so fiercely, why they sacrificed so much for bonds of blood, but they could not deny what they saw. A man who should have been broken was instead stronger than ever, and a child who should have been weak was instead full of life. Daniel whispered to himself as the night grew colder, "They will never understand us, Lily. They will never know what it means to fight for someone else. That is why we survive. That is why we will always survive." He pulled her closer, wrapping a worn blanket around her small body, and closed his eyes. The years had carved lines into his face and calluses into his hands, but they had not taken his spirit. He was still here. Lily was still here. And though the future was uncertain, he felt a strange certainty in his heart. No matter what storms came, no matter what choices haunted them, they would endure together. What Daniel did not know was that fate was already moving, and that soon the silence of the colony would be broken by the return of the woman who had left them, her steps heavy with regret, her eyes filled with tears, and her voice trembling with words he never thought he would hear again. The colony morning began like any other with the shrill alarms of the work, sirens echoing across the metal streets and the miners dragging themselves to another day of labor under the eyes of alien guards. Daniel woke early as he always did, Lily still curled against him in the small bed they shared. She stirred when he rose, rubbing her eyes and yawning before clinging to his arm, begging him not to go. He kissed her forehead and told her he would return by night, the same promise he made every day. He placed food on the table, tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, and left her in the care of another human woman who watched over the children while their parents worked. The mines were dark and filled with the sound of striking tools, but Daniel's mind was far from the stone walls. For weeks now he had felt a strange weight in his chest, a sense that something was about to change. He ignored it, focusing on the rock, on the sweat dripping down his back, on the steady rhythm of survival. Yet when the work ended and he returned to the surface, the sight waiting for him froze him in his tracks. At the edge of the settlement, near the gates where the traders docked their ships, a small crowd had gathered. Whispers spread through the humans and the aliens alike, whispers that grew into shock as a lone figure stepped forward. It was a woman, thin and weary, her clothes torn from travel, her face lined with sorrow. Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. It was Emma. She looked different from the woman he remembered. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale, her eyes filled with shadows that seemed to swallow her whole. She walked slowly, as though each step was weighed down by regret. And when her gaze fell upon him, she stopped, trembling, her lips parting but no words escaping. The crowd parted as she moved toward him. Daniel stood frozen, his fists clenching at his sides, his heart pounding in his chest with a storm of emotions he could not control. Anger surged first, a burning rage at the memory of the night she left, at the years he had carried the burden alone. Then sorrow, the reminder of the love they once shared, the nights they had dreamed of raising their child together. And beneath it all, fear of what her return would mean, fear of the pain it would stir in Lily. Emma fell to her knees before him, her hands shaking as she pressed them together. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Daniel, please. Forgive me." The words cut through him like a blade. He wanted to shout, to tell her she had no right to ask forgiveness, that she had abandoned not just him but their daughter, that she had left them both to suffer. But his voice caught in his throat. The crowd around them was silent, watching with wide eyes, aliens and humans alike. Forgiveness was not something the colony knew. To them, weakness was punished, betrayal was final. They watched, curious, as if studying some strange human ritual. Emma's tears fell freely, streaking down her face as she looked up at him. "I was afraid," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I couldn't survive here. I thought Lily would die if I stayed. I thought you would be better without me, but I was wrong. Everywhere I went, I felt her absence tearing me apart. I could not sleep, I could not breathe, I could not live knowing what I had done. Please, Daniel, let me see her. Let me see my daughter." The mention of Lily's name struck him harder than any blow. In that moment, Lily ran from the shelter where she had been playing, her small voice calling for her father. She stopped when she saw Emma, her eyes wide with confusion. She was only 3, but she recognized the face from old pictures Daniel had shown her. She looked between them, her little brow furrowing as she whispered, "Mama?" Daniel felt the world collapse around him. He reached for Lily, pulling her close, his protective instinct stronger than ever. Emma reached too, her hands trembling, but Daniel blocked her with his arm. His voice was hard when he spoke. "You left her. You left us. You don't get to walk back in as if nothing happened." Emma's sobs grew heavier. She pressed her forehead to the ground before him, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve her. I know I don't deserve you. But please let me try. Let me prove I can be better. Just one chance. That's all I ask." Lily clung to her father's leg, confused and frightened, her small voice asking why her mother was crying. Daniel had no answer. He looked down at Emma, then at his daughter, and his heart twisted in ways he could not explain. He wanted to hate the woman before him, but part of him saw the pain in her eyes and knew it was real. She had suffered too, though by her own choice, and now she had returned broken, begging for the one thing only he could grant. The aliens whispered among themselves, baffled by what they witnessed. To them, betrayal was permanent. A deserter was never welcomed back. But humans were different, and they sensed that something was unfolding here that defied their understanding. Daniel took a deep breath, his voice low and steady. "You don't get forgiveness just because you ask for it. You will have to earn it, and I will not let you hurt her again. If you stay, you will stay under my watch, and you will prove with every breath that you are here for her and not for yourself. Do you understand?" Emma lifted her head, her eyes wet with tears, and nodded desperately. "Yes, I will do whatever it takes." Lily peeked around her father's leg, her small voice trembling as she whispered again, "Mama?" She stretched out her hand, innocent and trusting, her eyes too young to understand the pain between her parents. Daniel's chest tightened as he looked at that hand, so small and fragile, reaching for the mother who had left. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, his jaw tight. For Lily's sake, he would allow Emma to stay. But forgiveness was not a gift to be given freely. It would have to be earned through fire and time. And as the colony night began to fall, a storm brewed on the horizon, both in the skies above and in the hearts of those who watched. The return of Emma was not the end of their struggle. It was only the beginning of something greater, a trial that would test not just one family, but the very soul of humanity itself. The days after Emma's return were filled with tension that seemed to hang over the small shelter like a storm cloud. Daniel kept his guard up at all times, his eyes watching her every move, his mind torn between the ache of betrayal and the faint hope that maybe she truly meant her words. Emma tried to help in small ways, cleaning the shelter, preparing food, or sitting with Lily when Daniel went to work, but he remained distant, his voice sharp whenever he spoke to her. Lily, on the other hand, clung to both of them, her small heart not yet shaped by anger or bitterness. She would take her mother's hand one moment and run to her father the next, her laughter filling the spaces that otherwise carried only silence. Yet the fragile balance was soon broken by forces far greater than their family. The colony was never a safe place, but now it stood on the edge of disaster. The storms that swept across the surface of the planet were growing worse with every passing cycle. Thick clouds of corrosive dust rolled in with winds that shook the metal walls, tearing roofs from shelters and flooding the air filters with grit. Power outages became frequent, and the alien overseers who ruled the colony grew harsh in their commands, forcing the miners to work longer hours to repair the failing systems. Panic spread quietly among the humans, who had little protection and even less food stored away. One night the alarms blared across the settlement, a sound so shrill woke even the deepest sleepers. Daniel rushed outside with Lily in his arms, Emma stumbling behind him, as red lights painted the sky and the ground trembled beneath their feet. A storm unlike any they had ever seen had struck the colony. The shields that normally kept the worst of it away flickered weakly, their energy failing, and corrosive dust poured through the cracks, burning anything it touched. Alien guards shouted orders, their tall frames stumbling as the winds knocked them aside. Panic erupted, families screaming as they fled for shelter, machines sparking and collapsing under the weight of the storm. Daniel saw at once that if something was not done, the colony would fall. The alien overseers were strong, but they relied on systems to survive just as much as the humans did, and now those systems were failing. The power cores that fed the shields were flickering, and if they went out completely, everyone in the settlement would be buried under dust and ruin. He turned to Emma, his voice cutting through the howling wind. "Take Lily inside and keep her safe. I'll go to the cores." Emma grabbed his arm, fear in her eyes. "You'll be killed out there. You can't fight this storm alone." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I've been fighting alone for 3 years. I'll manage." He pulled away, but Lily's cry stopped him. She clutched at his shirt, her small eyes wide with fear. "Papa, don't go," she begged, her voice trembling. He knelt, pressing his forehead to hers. "I have to, Lily. If I don't, no one will be safe. I need you to be brave for me." Her little hands shook as she held onto him, but at last she nodded, tears running down her cheeks. Emma pulled her close, and Daniel turned and ran into the storm. The path to the power cores was chaos. Metal debris whipped through the air, shelters crumbled, and sparks rained down from torn wires above. Daniel fought against the wind, his body straining with every step, but his determination burned stronger than the storm. He reached the cores to find several aliens struggling to restart them, their heavy claws useless against the delicate wiring. Sparks leapt from the machines, and the aliens cursed, unable to make sense of the tangled circuits. Daniel did not hesitate. He pushed past them, his hands moving quickly as he studied the mess of wires. Years of scavenging and repairing broken machines for survival had taught him more about these systems than the aliens ever cared to learn. Where they saw failure, he saw a way forward. He tore strips from his shirt, using them to insulate wires, rerouting power with quick improvisation. His fingers bled, his body shook, but he did not stop. The aliens stared. Disbelief etched into their faces as the weak hum of the cores grew louder under his touch. One of them shouted at him to step back, but Daniel ignored them, shouting over the storm, "If you want to live, let me work," and they did. For the first time, the proud overseers stepped aside and let the human take charge. Back at the shelter, Emma held Lily close, her own heart pounding with terror. She wanted to run after Daniel, but the memory of leaving 3 years ago held her frozen. She had abandoned him once, and now he was risking his life again while she could do nothing but wait. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered to Lily, "Your father is stronger than anyone here. He will come back to you. I swear it." Minutes stretched into an eternity as the storm roared, and then a sudden surge of light cut through the darkness. The shields flared back to life, glowing bright against the choking clouds, pushing the storm back with steady force. The alarms shifted from warning to steady hum, and the colony breathed again. When Daniel staggered back to the shelter, his clothes torn and his hands burned, Lily ran to him with a cry of joy, throwing her arms around his neck. Emma stood frozen for a moment, watching the sight of father and daughter clinging to each other, before stepping forward with tears streaming down her face. "You saved them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved all of us." Daniel looked at her, his chest heaving, his face streaked with dust and sweat. He wanted to tell her that he had not saved her, that he had done it for Lily, but the words died on his lips. For in her eyes he saw something he had not seen before, something raw and real. It was not just regret. It was the desperate hope of someone who wanted to change, who wanted to belong again. The aliens gathered in silence, their gazes fixed on the human who had done what they could not. Whispers spread through the crowd, disbelief giving way to grudging respect. They had thought humans were weak, fragile, incapable of withstanding the storms of this world, but Daniel had proven them wrong. He had not only survived, he had led Dot as the winds finally began to fade and the settlement steadied. Daniel stood with Lily in his arms and Emma by his side. He did not speak of forgiveness, not yet, for his heart still bore the scars of her leaving. But something had shifted, both within him and within the colony. The storm had shown them all what humanity truly was, not fragile, not broken, but unyielding, capable of bending the universe itself to protect what they loved. And though the storm outside had ended, Daniel knew another storm was just beginning, one that would not be fought with wires or machines, but with choices, trust, and the fragile hope of a family learning to heal. The storm had passed, but its shadow still lingered over the colony. The shelter stood scarred, the machines groaned under the strain, and the people, both human and alien, walked the streets in silence as if they were still listening for the roar of the winds. Yet in that silence something had changed. The story of how the human father had braved the storm to bring the power cores back to life spread quickly, whispered first by the miners, then repeated by the children, until even the alien overseers could not deny what they had seen. For the first time, their voices did not carry mockery when they spoke of a human. Instead, they carried something heavier, something close to respect. Daniel felt none of that respect for himself. His body ached, his hands burned, and every breath hurt, but all he cared about was that Lily was safe. She clung to him as though she would never let go, her small arms wrapped tight around his neck, her soft voice whispering again and again, "Papa, you came back, you came back." He kissed her hair and held her close, whispering that he would always come back. But when he looked up, his eyes met Emma's, and the fire of conflict returned to his chest. Emma had not stopped watching him since the storm. She had stood in the crowd as the aliens muttered and marveled, her face streaked with dust and tears, her heart torn open by what she had seen. She remembered the night she had left, believing she was too weak to stay, and now she saw that Daniel had done the impossible alone, raising their daughter in a place meant to break him. Shame weighed on her shoulders heavier than any chain. Yet along with shame came a fragile spark of hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could still find her place beside them. That night, when Lily finally slept, Emma approached him carefully. He sat by the dim lamp in their shelter, his hands resting on the table, his eyes distant. She spoke softly, her voice shaking. "Daniel, I know nothing I say will erase what I did. I left you when you needed me most. I left her when she was only days old. I can never undo that. But please, let me try to make it right. Let me be here for her now. Let me help you carry this weight." Daniel lifted his gaze to her, his eyes tired but burning. "Do you think it is that simple? That you can walk back after 3 years and suddenly be a mother again? Do you know what I had to endure? Every night she cried, I was the one to hold her. Every time she was hungry, I found food even if I went without. Every time she laughed, I was the one she looked to. You chose to leave, and now you ask to step back in as if none of that matters." His words were sharp, but beneath them was a wound that had never healed. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, her tears falling freely. I know I don't deserve it. But I will do whatever it takes to prove myself. I will not run again. If you want me to scrub the floors, if you want me to labor in the mines, I will. Just let me earn back her trust. Let me earn yours." For a long time, Daniel said nothing. His mind was a storm of anger and sorrow, yet when he glanced toward Lily's sleeping face, his heart softened. The little girl deserved more than bitterness and broken promises. She deserved a chance at family, even if it came with risk. At last he spoke, his voice low but steady. "This is not about me anymore. It is about her. If you stay for her. If you leave again, you will destroy her. Do you understand that?" Emma nodded through her tears. "Yes, I will never leave again." Days turned into weeks, and slowly Emma began to prove her words. She rose early, helping Daniel prepare for the mines, watching Lily with patience and tenderness. She learned to repair broken equipment from him, her hands clumsy at first but steadier each day. When food was scarce, she gave her share to Lily without complaint. And at night, when the child asked for stories, Emma told her of Earth's oceans and skies, of memories before the colony, weaving hope into the small shelter's walls. Daniel remained cautious, his heart guarded, but he could not deny the change. He saw Emma was no longer the frightened woman who had run. She was hardened by regret, but also stronger for it. The aliens noticed too, whispering again of the strange resilience of humans, not just in one man but in a people who could fall apart and still find a way back together. Then came the day the alien overseers summoned Daniel to the council. They had studied what had happened during the storm, how he alone had saved the cores when their strongest had failed. One of them, a towering figure with skin like stone, addressed him with a voice like thunder. "Human, you have shown strength we did not expect. Not strength of body, but of will and of mind. Tell us, what gives you this power?" Daniel stood before them, Lily's small hand clutching his, Emma by his side. He thought of all the pain, the betrayal, the endless struggle, and the love that had carried him through it all. His answer was simple, but it echoed through the chamber with a weight the aliens could not ignore. We survive because we fight for each other. You think strength is only in muscle and bone, but strength is in love, in family, in refusing to give up on the ones who need us. That is what makes us human. The chamber fell silent. The aliens, who had always measured worth in dominance and endurance, did not know how to respond. Yet they could not deny the truth of what they had seen. For in the face of storms, betrayal, and despair, the humans had endured, not by standing alone, but by standing together. That night, back in the shelter, Daniel sat with Emma and Lily between them. For the first time, he let his guard down just enough to breathe without anger tightening his chest. He turned to Emma, his voice softer than it had been in years. I cannot promise I will forget what happened, but I will try to forgive, not for you, for her. Emma's tears flowed again, but this time they were tears of hope. She took his hand, and for a moment, they simply sat in silence, listening to the steady breath of their daughter as she slept. The colony outside still groaned under storms and hardship, but within that small shelter, something stronger than steel was being rebuilt. A family, scarred but unbroken, bound not just by blood, but by choice. And as aliens whispered in wonder about the strange resilience of humans, Daniel knew the truth. Humanity's strength was not in never falling. It was in rising again, in forgiving, in choosing love even after the deepest wounds. And so the story that began with abandonment did not end in despair. It ended in endurance, in a child's laughter, in a family pieced back together, and in the proof that humanity's greatest power was not survival alone, but the unyielding spirit to heal, to forgive, and to carry one another through even the darkest storms. The end.